Okay, here's the deal, everyone. I'm not going to bullshit you with that last video. I think that was just completely terrible. It was really terrible lighting, and let's see, I'm messing the wrong screw. Here we go. Yeah, it was just really terrible lighting, and the angle was shit. Let's just say that. So I feel like I can do better. So that's what I'm going to do right here. I'm going to redo my Gearbox video and show you all the components, show you how to put everything back, show you how to fix something within the gearbox. So from my experience, first time I cracked open a gearbox, it was very stressful. You know why? Because there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of springs, a lot of different components that are inside of a gearbox. Once you open it up, if you're not careful enough, these components can fly out, and one of the worst things you can do is lose some of these pieces, because if you end up not being able to put your gearbox back together with everything inside of it, anything can go wrong. And I truly think that it is important for people who are experienced working on gearboxes, my bad, should be able to spread this wisdom to people who have no idea what they're doing. What's the toughest part about doing a gearbox? It is putting it back together, because it is the most frustrating. You're having to try time and time again to make sure that all the pieces are in the right place and making sure that you can close up the gearbox. Okay, here we go. I have unscrewed all of the screws from the gearbox shell. Now, the most important thing is we want to make sure that this spring doesn't fly out. There is, if you notice here, there is a hole on the back end of the gearbox shell. I'm going to take a tool like this, make sure that it doesn't have, make sure that it's smooth, that it doesn't have any ridges. Because if your spring guide is polymer or plastic or any kind of that composite, you may end up stripping the threading on the inside of the spring guide. So with pressure applied downward on this screw, you're going to want to carefully open up the gearbox shell. Just separate the entire shell. There we go. I'm going to lay that flat right there. And now what we want to do is we want to release the tension from the spring. So we remove the spring and the spring guide, set that aside. Now what we're looking at is we are looking at a set of gears. Can't really point out which ones they are. Bevel, sector, and pinion. No particular order, but we're going to go ahead and take these gears out. Okay, this is the anti-reversal latch. I see a lot of people have problems with this. The issue that I hear with the anti-reversal latch is that it's making this weird noise when I pull the trigger. The battery has a full charge, but whenever I pull the trigger, it makes a clicking noise, like the motor can't move. That may be because of this, or it may be because of a different issue. Okay, what I ended up fixing in my gearbox video is this piece. This right here is what's called a tappet plate. This is what allows the air nozzle to move forward and backward. That is important because it will help BBs feed properly into the hop-up unit. This is the air nozzle. It's going to rest inside of the tappet plate. Then you have your cylinder head, your piston, and your piston head. Piston and the cylinder is important because it is what creates compression, basically the air that you need to shoot your BB. You want to make sure that there is a very tight compression seal. You can see right here, this is not very good, but the last time I shot my airsoft gun, it was shooting 320 on .2s, so that's normal for CQB. If I wanted to, I could take pipe pipe tape or seal tape, whichever you're familiar with, and wrap it around, because I've seen a video about that. It actually helps with compression. Continuing with the gears, just going to remove it. Ain't nobody freaking out. Okay. Next thing that I'm going to show you is, you see this shim? Hold on. I got to remove the shim first. Well, jeez. This is embarrassing. Come on. Okay, I'll find another place to get a shim. There we go. This is a shim. Basically, what this little washer-looking metallic object is it is what can help make the gears align properly with each other. There is a angle of engagement which allows the gears to be placed in the right area. So we're talking, we want the gear to be, sorry I'm shaking, I have no idea why I'm shaking so terribly. They will help the adjustment of the gears to align properly. That's something that you're really going to need, and it also kind of helps with letting your gears flow smoothly, because if you have too many shims up against the gearbox and in between the gear itself, you're going to have a lot of grinding, and that's not really something that you want. Okay, here's the trigger. Don't really want to mess with it unless if you intend on installing like a hair trigger or something like that. That would be something for Speed QB. I'm not really into that. So this is more or less like a milsim gearbox break down and put back together. And then the wiring, yeah, just make sure that both of the wiring stays into this little valley right here. Okay, now that we have everything taken out, we're going to get back to putting everything together. Shit. Okay. What I'm doing right now is I am checking each and every component. I'm looking for which areas need shims. So if all of these have one shim, that should be good. That should be fine. And this one has an extra shim. This one, yep, this one also has an extra shim. That one has a shim as well. Okay, so each one has exactly one shim. What I'm going to do about this is I'm going to set this one, this gear, in first. I'm going to test to make sure that it's spinning freely. About the lubrication and all that, I'm not a pro when it comes to that. I've never used silicone or any type of lubricant for my airsoft gun, so that will be something I'll learn about later on in the future. The next thing is I'm going to put in the anti-reversal latch, and when I put it inside of its in its hole, I'm going to pull back on it because I need this bevel gear, I guess is what it's called, to sit inside of its hole before I let go of it. And you may need to rotate it counterclockwise so that way the anti-reversal latch catches on to the bevel gear. Trust me, that's really important. And then we're going to take this last one, this last gear, and we're going to drop it in right there. Okay, and what's very, very important is you see this piece right here? That needs to be at the 1 o'clock position, so we're just going to fix that real carefully. There we go, it's at the 1 o'clock position. Alright, from this point on, what we want to do is we want to have the cylinder head and the tappet plate with the air nozzle. We're going to put the air nozzle on with the tappet plate, and then you see these holes right here? These are going to rest on this little indent right here in the front of the gearbox shell. So it'll rest there, and you kind of want to wiggle around your tappet plate because there's a track that it sits into. And then you're going to push the tappet plate forward. Now basically what this spring is this is the tappet spring. This is one of the pieces I was telling you about. If you don't do this, if you don't take the tension off the spring, perhaps this is one of the things that can fly out. So there's a hook on the tappet plate. You're going to hook that spring onto the tappet plate hook, and you're going to find yourself a screwdriver, something small enough that I will fit into, and then there's a pin sticking out on the end of the gearbox shell. You're going to put the end of that spring onto that pin in the front. Now with that, this tappet plate is going to want to push itself upward in relation to the gear that it's supposed to be resting onto. That may become a problem, but just bear with me. We're going to figure out how to deal with that. This is the issue. You see why it's bending upward? This tappet plate is bending upward because it is resting itself against this black piece right here, and it's in the forward position. My concern is when I was at SS Airsoft, it snapped over constant use because this tappet plate was resting in this position prior. It put a lot of tension on the tappet plate and it weirded out, which means that it was bent out of shape like this. So after constant use, yeah, this piece right here is going to snap apart. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this gear and I'm just going to move it clockwise just a tad bit more. I want to be comfortable with the fact that this thing is not going to be bending upward. Okay, so here is our piston and our piston head. It's going to rest on a track. So put the piston head into the cylinder and make sure that it's resting along the track. Okay, now that that's in there, what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the tappet plate is resting downward, and then we're going to go back and work with the spring and the spring guide. Apply pressure, and now we should be able to close up the gearbox. The way that I like to do this is I'm going to start from this corner and I'm going to close everything up. What's very important about this process is you want to make sure that all these pins from the anti-reversal latch to the gears align with these holes on the gearbox shell. Very important, because if it doesn't, then there's no way you're going to be able to get this gearbox to close up. It may take some force, but don't be too rough with it. You want it to close, you don't want it to break. If you don't get it the first time, you may have to try again. So what I'm seeing right here is that it wasn't closing because there was a shim in the way. No big deal. If you have a tool that's small enough, you can move that shim out of the way. Now with this area closed up, you want to make sure, you want to take something flat, something like a flathead, and you want to make sure that everything is out of the way from the creases, or from the seam of the gearbox, because that's one of those things that's going to prevent your gearbox from closing up. Okay. I have a bad feeling that something is in the way. Maybe it's the tappet plate. Okay. So like I said before, doing gearboxes can be frustrating. You may have to try this many times. Don't worry about it. It's okay. So get your shims in the right place. I want to make sure that this tappet plate is... Oh, that's why, because it's not in the 1 o'clock position. I thought I moved it over. Apparently, it decided not to. Okay, 1 o'clock position. Tappet plate. Come on, rest. Rest. Yes. Alright. Closing it up now. Here we go. Alright. Going to move the anti-reversal latch over. Gearbox is closed. So keep pressure on both sides of the gearbox shell. Look it over. Make sure that the line that separates the gearbox shells is completely flush with each other. Okay, mine is. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put the gearbox back together. Or, I'm sorry, put the screws back in. Technically, we just did put it all back together. In fact, I'm just going to skip this part, fast forward it, whatever, because this really isn't important. I'm pretty sure you guys get the gist of how to screw in screws to an object that looks like the gun. There are holes. There are screw holes meant for screws. And I'm sure if you're smart enough, you can figure out where those screws go. Don't worry, I have faith in you. Alright folks, and there you have it. Just like that, I put together, well, took apart, showed you every part, and put back together a version 2 gearbox. So, if you have any questions, go ahead and shoot me, not literally, shoot me a message in the comments section, and hopefully I'll be able to help you out. Alright, later.